Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode. Today's guest is Mark Cox, a marriage recovery coach. But before he was helping other men save their families, he was the man who nearly destroyed his own. His wife, Jen, told him that she wasn't in love with him anymore and she wanted to separate. They had 3 children and everything on the line. This is the story of what he did next and what he learned about what it really means to be a man. Welcome to the next chapter, Mark.
Thanks, Luke. Good to be here.
So, for context for my listeners, before we get into the breakdown of everything, just give us your honest version of who Mark Cox is and who you were before all of this happened, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. It's great to be here. Oh, that's a great question. Where to start all that? I mean, I guess kind of professionally who I am is marriage recovery coach. I'm beginning to call myself more of a marriage crisis coach. I realize that's probably more the kind of life point at which I work with men. But my background before that was as a psychiatric nurse. I worked in the NHS for many years. But as you pointed out in the intro, I got myself into a real mess. I got our marriage into a real mess. It's a long kind of looping story in a way, but it really kind of starts with, if we go back to who I was, on the surface, I was somebody who probably led 2 lives really. On the surface, successful, professional, 3 children, probably looked like quite a good dad from the outside. Well, I probably was a good dad, but I would say I led 2 lives really. On the one hand, I was leading mental health services, women's mental health services. I think I always think of myself as very kind of in touch with my own feelings and quite a kind of sensitive and thoughtful, competent person. But behind closed doors, I would say a bit of an alcohol problem. We partied a lot, and this led to me getting myself involved in what I later to come see as kind of addictive sexual behavior. And so for many years, my wife thought she was married to this lovely man from the outside. People think she had a great husband. And then all of a sudden, and this is probably where our kind of marriage journey started, all of a sudden she discovered I was having an affair. And when she caught me, I think a bit of relief, I sat down and said, it isn't just this one thing. Out came, over the course of a few months, quite a long history of infidelity. So that's really where our kind of marriage crisis started. But actually, that journey then took several years. So I went through a addiction recovery process. I was in a 12-step program. That really was where my interest in personal development and growth kind of really started. I had therapy. I went through that journey. But the bit that I kind of do now really starts several years later. And that's where you started with my story, was when I had made all these promises to be somebody different. We'd been through this recovery journey in our marriage. And yet I wasn't living up to that. I may have stopped the addictive behaviors. I stopped cheating. I had, my wife obviously was recovering from betrayal trauma. But it was actually finally when she got tired of the broken promises, she got tired of me wanting her to be over it, that led to, and this is really what I help men with now, her falling out of love with me. And, the moment she told me that, obviously I knew because I had been in it. And that was really when my own crisis came. So in a way, it's like, there's 2 parts to our story. But it was that crushing fear of losing the family was probably even worse than when everything had been discovered 4 years before that. So that's a kind of overview in terms of, a very short version of my story in terms of how I got into that crisis and my particular passion for helping men in that space now.
Okay, so if we rewind and go back then, Mark, there's going to be lots of dads listening to this that can relate to your story, I'm sure. What leads men to betray their wives and, like you say, go down that road and how can they get distracted?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, and it's probably different for so many different men. So of course I'll start with my own journey. I mean, I think to some degree, a huge part of mine was alcohol use. Like I did things that I would never have done had I not been drinking very heavily, being in situations with work colleagues and things like that when I was intoxicated. And my drinking funnily enough, it was becoming a dad when my drinking really kind of blew up. And I've heard that story a few times. It's like we go from drinking on nights out to suddenly it's like, drinking at home. And then that really accelerated, So definitely alcohol enabled me to do things. The pocket rocket, the problem that we all have these days, and I'm a smartphone generation person, was access to pornography. And I think it's probably one of the biggest triggers for me was I just became obsessional about it. And obviously I said I went for a 12-step program. I actually chose Sex Addicts Anonymous as the place where I kind of got support because it was the one that most resonated. Although I could have easily gone down and worked on, and it's the same 12 steps. It's the same process. So for me, I think it was that combination of those two things, but probably the core wound was, I think, probably a fear of the world, feeling inadequate as a man, not feeling particularly good with women when I was younger. And suddenly I find myself in a job where I'm a bit older than some of my colleagues. I'm competent, perhaps for the first time, I felt attractive. And so the combination of the three things, really, I think opportunity occurred. But yeah, probably mainly I would say would be the alcohol addiction, the alcohol problem for me. And a sense of kind of almost like in the moment feeling, brings a bit of shame even saying it today, although I've worked through a lot of this stuff, but to say it publicly, to feel affirmed as a man, and I'm sure that's often the case. Some of the guys I work with where infidelity has been part of their journey, when they first meet me, they'll say, I don't know. Like, my wife is beautiful. We were happy. And that was the same for us. There was absolutely no, I was really attracted to Jen. We had a great sex life. There was nothing that was missing that I was going looking for, apart from some other needs that were just being fueled, I think, with an unhealthy obsession with sex, an unhealthy relationship with alcohol. So I think that's part of my journey. What I learned really from meeting many men in a similar position was that I think, we just live in a culture where kind of sex is being pushed at us all the time. And I think it just became super unhelpful. And then the biggest thing, I think, was this weird belief that what my wife didn't know didn't hurt her. And actually, because she didn't know, because infidelity had been part of our early journey when we were getting together and on and off a bit, we were young, and there was some habit. There was already secrets there, and I think you get caught in the web of. I got caught in the web of kind of secrets, and if I show up for 3 or 4 months and I'm a great dad and I'm a nice person, we can all just forget. I can just forget about that stuff I did until, the next office party or the next night out with my friends, and something would happen. And I guess I got into a kind of cycle of that kind of shame, pull myself back together, do the right thing. I'm a good guy, this kind of hiding behind this image of, I'm a good person, really. So I think probably that's what I see certainly that's what I see in myself. I'm sure there are other parts, other parts to other men's story. I think somehow maybe a lot of that shame went on, and I started to kind of wonder sometimes, was I with the wrong person? I started feeling very guilty that, how could I be doing this to her? And so that, I think that sometimes got me caught up in. And then, people make themselves available. People get excited. They get caught up in their own affirmation. And sometimes the chance meeting, the wrong thing said, the text replied to that shouldn't be replied to, and that led to, the short but obviously devastating affairs that I had and my wife found out about. So I think they're probably the core wound for me in all of this has always been not feeling good enough.
Mm. Mm.
I
Yeah,
think it's a massive one for men.
it is huge.
And it's funny, I've been processing it for years, and I feel as though I've only just recently unhooked some of it. But it'll always be with me. There'll always be that question. But yeah, not feeling good enough, not feeling man enough. So yeah, they're the things that come to mind, I think.
Seeking validation elsewhere to be,
Yeah,
to sort of
seeking
boost yeah, to boost your ego.
validation. I think there's a deeper one actually, and that
Okay.
is, and it's almost like, how to say this, like, because it's controversial, but almost feeling like it's not just validation, it's also conquering. It's almost like feeling like an assertion of your own masculinity. But of course, it's a toxic masculinity. And that's not a term I use very much, I have to say. I'm not, um, but it is the shadow side of masculinity, I think. Um, to almost make up for that, maybe for that hole, for that sense of lack. So yeah, it is validation, but I think there's something deeper than that. It's
Yeah.
almost like self-affirmation as a man.
And it's escapism as well, I guess.
Yeah.
If you can get away with living another life and that
Yeah.
really excites you, and like
Yeah.
you say, you keep justifying it, I deserve it, I work hard, I am a good dad, I'm a good parent, whatever that might be. And it all goes back to the stories we tell ourselves. I think we all do it, don't we? We all justify our own bullshit, whether that's right or wrong. As humans, that's what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you've ever seen the Netflix documentary about Ashley Madison, another nurse. I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he tells a very similar story. Um, and he was caught through the Ashley Madison kind of leak but yeah, his story is kind of almost like a parallel to mine. It's like, just this secret life, this secret kind of, and it is an escapism actually, probably an escape. But I'm cautious to say that because I think, there was a cowardice to it for me. It's like, rather than show up as a man in my marriage,
Yeah,
rather
do
than
do the hard work.
do the hard work, exactly. And I just didn't know how to make my wife happy at home. So of course you start to justify it. You're like, oh, we're not happy because she criticizes me, or, if she was just like this, or, and so like, now looking back and everything I've learned in order to save the marriage, everything I try and help guys to learn through, those skills that we're just not taught, how to be a man in a long-term relationship, how to provide leadership and create safety, and all of those things that are so important. In the absence of that, my wife's complaints or feedback became justification to go and run away. So what I don't think is true is that I was somehow, I was certainly no victim in all of this. I was seeking something. That was the thing I was seeking outside the marriage. It wasn't the sex.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
someone to tell me that I was all right, really. And that's
yeah,
brilliant in the first couple of months of meeting someone, because they'll tell you whatever you want to hear.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, the
Your
honeymoon
wife,
period.
but your wife is there to help you grow and to be your mirror. And my wife is brilliant at that. I'm very, 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 very lucky that she will not put up with my crap. But yeah, like I say, at the time, that probably became a bit of a justification.
So when did the first cracks start to show then,
Yeah.
Mark? When did it when I
In the
mean,
marriage,
you were living this
yeah,
double life.
yeah,
When did it start to unravel?
yeah. Well, I think the truth of the matter is, and this is the true cowardice of this, is that I was caught red-handed.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, my wife found me texting somebody, and I think it was a bit of relief at first, and that's why I did that thing of just dumping. I didn't dump all of it because I was still in self-preservation mode. So it actually took me about 3 months to tell her everything, which we later discovered probably the worst way to tell somebody something. And, it's the drip drip effect. And it really obviously traumatized my wife. So that, I guess, and I'm really not proud of this bit, but I ran off with the other person. I was still hiding in all of that. What I'm very blessed about is I came to my senses fairly quickly. And I think kind of deep down, I'd always had one thing I got from my family. And maybe it was partly the Christian faith that I was raised in. It was partly just the family that I was raised in. My mum was a psychotherapist. My dad was a priest in the Church of England. And I was always taught that no matter what you do in life, there's always forgiveness, there's always redemption. There's always the possibility of making things better, or at least not any worse. And I remember kind of a particular moment, kind of like sitting at the edge of my bed and realizing that I had a choice now. I had a choice to go, and I probably lost everything. Well, at the time I would have thought, well, I've lost everything. There's no way Jen would ever take me back. But I can now go and make it better than worse, if that makes sense. So we went through a good year really of, I was out of the house for several months. Eventually Jen was willing to kind of have me back in the house while she decided what we were going to do. And that's when I joined 12-step program, got a therapist and started that part of our journey. That's how it all broke, I guess. That's our, and in a strange way, we still celebrate that day, the day that, I started to live in truth. So that's that first bit. But I guess, as I said, it's quite a convoluted story because really, a year later, we had done the work. Jen, I'd given up alcohol, and things were better. Jen began to trust that I'd told her everything eventually, that there was no more surprises. She wasn't going to suddenly find anything else out. It was, and I think it was after a year, we had read somewhere with a kind of sex addiction specialist that, give it a year. And Jen's brilliant like that. She's like, well, if that's what the book said, I'm going to give it a go for the children, and she stayed with me for that period. And things kind of got a lot better. We both went off and did kind of personal transformation work. We both did the Path of Love retreat, went on quite a journey of healing. And not only did I stay in the 12 steps, but I sponsored and I chaired it, and it became kind of real part of my life. It's probably where I started getting the inkling of coaching men in particular. But it was kind of really to answer the question more precisely, when did the cracks start to show? I would say try and get the years right, but it was 4 years later.
Wow. Okay.
When I think we would go back through cycles of, certain things I did would remind Jen, the micro behaviors, or, we would have certain arguments and some of those old patterns of the way that I dealt with those discussions. What I've now learned is like the difference between how men and women kind of try and navigate conversations without realizing it. I would often, what she would experience as gaslighting, I'd say, well, I didn't say that, or I didn't mean that, and really just invalidating her experience. And probably the thing that finally pushed it was I'd made lots of promises to be a particular type of husband, to put Jen as center, to arrange dates, to put the marriage as the highest, most important thing, to live up to those promises. And I just didn't do that. But I think the worst bit of it was that, looking back, I started to see Jen as the problem. It's her past trauma. It's her past problems. It's, if she was just this, then we would be happy. Like I've paid that check, that kind of thing. I guess because I was just feeling just feeling the pressure of it. And so, we were happy at times. We were unhappy. It wasn't. But it was finally when I packed her off to this transformation retreat, thinking, right, this will fix her. She'll go. She'll go away and realize, just like I went away and realized, that she was everything. I was everything she ever wanted. And of course, no, she quite rightly came back full of life and full of questioning. Is this really the life I want? And so that's really, that was really the lightning bolt, or the kind of, and then this is the bit that I'm most grateful for Jen, not taking me back after the infidelity, but the not putting up with an unhappy marriage, not putting up with not the best version of me. Yeah, although it was heartbreaking. It was that moment that she came back. I think it was within a day or two of her coming back. I just knew something was different, and I started to panic. And I was reflecting on this recently. What I realized, what I could feel was different, is that all the way through the previous part of our recovery journey, I knew that Jen loved me. Like, I knew there was that love for me. She might have hated what I did, and she might be terrified that I was going to do it again and angry with me. But she was checked in. She was all in for hoping it could heal. This was like, I care for you, but I'm not in love with you. Yeah, so many men I meet now, like, that's the most heartbreaking bit, because yeah, you just feel it. So I think, kind of losing your question a bit, but I think it was that really is the cracks. If you wanted to describe when did the cracks start showing, it was that. And that it was the marriage crisis that sent me spinning and ultimately changed my life, I think, forever, really.
How long were you married for, or how long were you together then in the build up to this, Mark?
Yeah. Married in 2010. 2018 was the discovery day that I described. And then this was 2022 when, when Jen said, look, I'm done. I don't want this anymore.
Right. Okay. So
But we've been together since, I think 2003. So yeah, so probably 15 years before discovery, 15 years of her being with somebody who, if let's be honest, she didn't truly know, you know.
So that was a rock bottom moment then, yeah? What did she say exactly to you, Mark, in that moment?
Yeah, so yeah, I remember she went out for a drink with a friend, and I went and picked her up um and I dropped in for a drink, and she said, I figured it out. And she says, I love you, but I'm not in love with you. Now, little did I know, this is like classic line. Like, so many men I meet now in the line of work I do that hear that exact line. And it's actually, I think, a very beautiful and kind way of describing what I described before. But yeah, it's that. I think what women mean by that is the romantic attraction, the kind of looking up to the man, the bit that gives them goosebumps, all of that's gone. The fire's gone, but there's care. I mean, it's so painful for us men, because it's like suddenly we're in almost like a childlike space. It's like,
Yeah. Spiraling.
it's deep painful. I mean, let's, not all women say it in that way, but yeah, that was the line. I will never forget it. And I just spiraled at that point into neediness, all the mistakes that us men make at this point, trying to, what about the kids? What about, what we've built? What about our history, having recovered the marriage? I thought that we were somehow more solid. But at the same time as the begging and the pleading, there was also the absolute gut punch of me just knowing, like, I knew what I'd promised 4 years before. I knew the vision I had given for this new life together, that I hadn't lived up to. So there was also for me like just a deep regret, deep shame. How do we tell the kids what's going to happen for the kids? What's going to happen? And of course, because I knew that it was me, I knew it would be me that would be leaving, and all of that. So I did spiral. I don't think I slept for about 4 days. Um, Jen obviously, got fed up with me crying and being, and that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was pretty bleak, at that
How
stage.
old were your children at this time as well?
So this is 22, so, um, I've got to do some fast maths now. Um, so it's 4 years ago, isn't it? So yeah, probably 13, 9, and 6. There we go.
Okay, so quite a mixture.
Yeah.
What were the things that you first tried to fix it,
Yeah.
and did they just make things worse?
Yeah, absolutely. So all that stuff I just described, kind of trying to persuade Jen why it would be good, how it was the pressure, the showing how much I loved her, and then suddenly doing all the things that several weeks before she wanted me to do. But actually, this switch had flicked. I mean, Jen describes it as being like a switch went off. What's confusing about our story is this did happen a bit later as well, but I don't want to confuse it because it was kind of similar. This journey really took another year because we got back together. You might say the switch came on, and then so we did loop a few times. Um, so this part of the journey, but this particular moment, this is the first time this really happened. Yeah, that was the stuff. Now I was really lucky here because of my work with the 12 steps and wanting to coach men and kind of I'd already kind of got this idea that I wanted to help men that had made mistakes like me. So I think my YouTube algorithm was already sending stuff to me about stuff like this. And so I came across, I think within like a week of what I just described, or maybe I even remembered. Yeah, I remembered a coach that I had already come across. And so I just went straight to them and had some savings. And I guess what I probably learned from my family life, what I learned from having been through the recovery process is like, we can't do this on our own. Like the same as I sometimes say now, the same ego that, has got us into this mess is unlikely to get us out of it. So like, there was no question for me. I mean, I had to use some savings and, scrape it together, but there was no question for me that so when you say what are the things you were doing, like one of the first lessons in this coaching program was stop this, stop saying that, stop buying flowers, all of that kind of stuff. That's just sending the wrong message of I'll only love you when you say you're going to leave me, things like that. So yeah, that was the stuff. And maybe even the guilt tripping, what about the kids, and like just,
Yeah, you're just pushing her further and further away,
further away.
digging yourself a deeper hole.
Yeah, and what I've learned now, and I talk to guys about, is actually the arguing, the begging, the pleading, whatever form that takes. What you're actually saying to your wife is, please come back into a relationship that made you unhappy. And so the first thing I now teach men from that, I guess the lesson that I learned the hard way was, get on her side about why she wants to leave you. Become an ally so that she doesn't need to argue with you about it. Actually, because probably for the first time, if you're able to make that shift, probably for the first time, you'll be actually listening to her.
Yeah, yeah.
You
Try
know?
and listen and understand.
Yeah. Yeah. And own the fact that I'll speak for myself, but own the fact that I've been a crappy husband.
You talk a lot about facing childhood wounds,
Yeah.
Mark. How far back does this stuff go for most men that you coach?
Yeah, that's a great question because it is so different. It's often, I have this analogy in my program. I talk about the cellar, that we've all got one. You might talk about shadow work, and I think shadow work for all people is important. The stuff that we don't want to look at in ourselves, the stuff that we bury. But the analogy I use with the guys I coach is the idea that we've all got a cellar. We put stuff we don't want to look at. We put stuff that, maybe our relationship with our dad, maybe trauma. I often meet, men that have had childhood trauma of all sorts. Or it might be a bit more like mine. It was, it was the embarrassing failed moments in teenage years that it just made me feel full of shame, made me feel laughed at by girls. It doesn't really matter. It can go back any time, but we shove it there and we think either I'll look at it later, or for most men, I won't look at it at all. Thank you very much. What I think happens for men that get as far as booking a call and working with a coach like me is the pain of losing everything suddenly becomes more painful than the pain of looking in the cellar. And so I think I think it goes all the way back. It goes all the way back to the stuff that we don't want to face. And we don't have a culture, do we, where, men are encouraged to talk to each other about their problems, about the stuff that's happened to them. There's full of shame. I think it's shifting. I think we are talking more and more about men's mental health, and I'm interested in the fact that I'm increasingly meeting men who are going to Andy's Man Club. I don't know much about it, but it's getting out there, isn't it? It's like we are beginning to talk about it, but I think most men don't get help or don't want to talk about this stuff until, they risk losing.
They hit that rock bottom, or things go really badly wrong. And then there's a lot of pieces to pick up.
Yeah. Or it comes out through addiction. It comes out through destructive behaviors, I guess.
So what does the inner work look like day to day, Mark, for your
Yeah.
clients and people you work with?
Yeah. So I'm a massive believer in meditation. I think it's like an absolute cornerstone for me. It's always been part of my life, on and off. That's the problem with meditation is, and like any growth work, it is about daily maintenance. It's about, repetition, isn't it?
Routine.
But yeah. So meditation is a big one. And that starts with mindfulness. Most of the men I work with never done anything like that. And it changes, they immediately, they notice the benefit of it. I use a lot of kind of journaling and journaling techniques. So getting men to get their thoughts, their feelings articulated. Most importantly, it's men's work. And what I mean by that is men collaborating together on this deeper stuff, on the challenges that they're going through, that you're not on your own, that it is safe to talk to other men, that, it is safe to talk to other people about what's going on. So I actually, although I coach people one-to-one, I bring everyone into a group program alongside the one-to-one. And people will say to me, Mark, your coaching's great, but it's the group that really made the difference. And that's really what my day-to-day life looks like. That's what changed my life, really, was attending, first of all, 12-step groups. I went on to do some of this transformational work, and it was through, kind of learning to share, learning to love the truth, to not hide the truth in shame, to love the truth more than being liked, I think.
Yeah. Radical honesty is so, so, so important. If you can't be honest with yourself, then that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Then you bury it and you bury it and you get up to the kind of stuff I got up to, I guess, So that's probably what it looks like. Of course, within the program, that gets developed. There's a lot of knowledge in there. There's, one of the key bits for me that we've lost in society is an explicit understanding of masculine and feminine differences, first and foremost, how we communicate, the frame that we see the world through. Of course, relationships are very different, and there's different, but there's definitely poles of masculinity and femininity within relationships. And if there isn't the pole, there isn't the attraction. So I teach a lot of that in the work that I do. But yeah, on the whole, it is about kind of that combination of looking after your spiritual health, your mental health, your physical health. I get men, I'm not a great bodybuilder, but I get every man lifting weight. I get every man looking after their physical health, their daily routine, their sleep, all of that stuff. I take a really holistic approach to all of this, because it just makes people feel better. And once people feel better and they get more clarity, you get that kind of compound effect of of everything. So yeah, that's what the daily work looked like for me. I think what really changed things for me was discovering NLP and discovering how I can kind of reprogram some of the automatic beliefs about myself and the automatic thoughts that come from that, challenging those core beliefs. I've had years of therapy, but if I'm honest, it was coaching and, NLP inspired coaching that actually shifted things for me.
Hmm.
Much more pragmatic, much more practical. Yeah. What am I going to do differently today as a result, I think.
Having had so much therapy,
Yeah.
Mark, what would you like your definition of the difference between therapy and coaching? What would that be? Because, and the reason I ask the question is there's so many people listening to this, so
Yeah.
many DMs that I get.
Yeah.
What the hell is coaching?
Yeah.
They think it's a football coach. They think it's a personal trainer, whatever that might be. So, could you explain it for my listeners in layman's terms,
Yeah,
please?
I'll caveat this by saying I'm not a very good football coach, first of all. I coach my son's football team, but I do more of the admin than the coaching itself. Yeah, so for me, I think about, so I do have a background in both. Of course, I was worked in mental health for many years. The way I think about the difference for me is coaching is about a directional arrow from here to where I want to get to. And what are the things that are going to get in the way? What are the things that are going to make that more likely to happen? Whereas for me, and when I see my therapist, I'm kind of more interested in some of the emotional patterns and so I blend the two in the work I do. But for me, yeah, so I think that's probably the biggest thing. What really changed things for me is like I can talk forever with the therapist about why and past events, about things from my childhood, and they are helpful. That is helpful. I think to understand ourselves, to bring awareness to some of that stuff. But way more important is how am I going to go and talk to Jen about that particular issue? What are the things that are going to get in the way of that going well? What do I need to understand? The coaching I deliver, the coaching I find really helpful is also mixed in with additional information. So, when I work with people, they have self-directed study in between. They get very clear on assimilating new knowledge and directing, a new way of growth. And I guess, like I said, I use the word holistic. For me, it's about all aspects of life. No point in sitting in therapy if you're still eating crap and getting 3 hours sleep a night.
Yeah, yeah,
It's not going to
it's the
make the
whole
difference.
package.
Got to be the whole package. So some of the guys that see me still see a therapist and find that works really well. Some of the guys that work with me, we do some of that more therapeutic informed coaching, depending on what they need. But yeah, really, at the end of a session with me, you are very clear about what your next steps are. And if you're not, then it's not been a good coaching session. So that's what I see as the difference. Like being very clear, this is my challenge. This is what I'm going to do to break through that. But yeah, I don't know whether you agree. That's just that
Yeah,
my
yeah, I do agree. I always say that therapy is like the past, like
yeah
revisiting childhood trauma, like you said, dealing with old memories and processing them.
yeah
Whereas coaching is what are you going to do moving forward and setting goals and targets and then taking actionable steps to get there because a goal can just be a dream if you just talk about it, right? But then you get a coach who holds you accountable and you move forward. Because even with personal trainers, if you try to explain to people 10, 20 years ago what a personal trainer is, they'd be like, "What?" They wouldn't understand, would they? But, like, all they are doing really is holding you accountable, and I think coach does the same, but it's more for the mental side, obviously, rather than the physical side with
yeah
with us.
yeah. And then there's another bit of coaching which I guess is like the NLP inspired kind of idea that kind of what we focus on is the reality that we get. This has become really, when I look back at, we talked a bit about porn. Like, obviously, if all I was looking at was porn, what the hell was I going to go and what reality was I going to go and create for myself? You know, so to be very yeah, I guess very graphic about about that. But like when I made a decision to become a coach a few years ago, I made sure that I was around people that were going to inspire me. Made sure that I started to have the image of this garden office that I'm now sat in, like of a life. And I started kind of, I don't understand much about some of the language around law of manifestation and things like that. But I do know that we create our reality by what we place focus on. And so a lot of the work I do with men is to really get them to envisage kind of what is the future that you want? You know, what does the man who saves his marriage, what's he going to do today? So yeah, like I don't know some of the technicals of why it works, but that was life changing for me.
That is manifestation in
Yeah.
its purest form, in my opinion. You may have listened to other episodes of this, Mark, but that's what I'm all about. I'm all about creating such a clear vision and such a clear North Star that that you're gonna get there, and you're gonna you can reverse engineer it, work out your micro steps, and then push on towards it. But I think when you create that vision in your head, like going back to NLP as well, and visualization, when it becomes really, really, really clear, then yeah, and just keep on moving towards it. But you need that belief, and then you need to take inspired action as you
Yeah.
move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just know that's true. You know, if I look back at my life, like I had to believe that our marriage was going to work out. And when I look back at that, I talked about there being a 9 months kind of like really best part of the year, really, of kind of uncertainty and stuff. It was only when I started doubting it that it would go in the wrong direction. Like as long as I was kind of clear, certain, visualizing where we needed to get to, began, you know, Jen kind of fell into trusting, you know, my changes, trusting things. So it's a huge, yeah, it's a huge part of that. I just thought of something I wanted to share. I think it was Joe Dispenza I was reading the other day talks about having gratitude for your future self.
That's right. He
I
does
don't
all the
quite
time.
understand the science of it, but I guess it kind of wires, you know, it wires our neurons and kind of primes our kind of genes,
Yeah.
our epigenetics in terms of creating that future. And so, yeah, so it's a big part of the visualization work I do now is to imagine myself in the future and then be grateful for that.
Yeah, yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. It gives you so much hope for the future. It keeps you optimistic, and then your brain and your mind's going to be wired to look for those opportunities and the signs, the serendipities, and yeah, I think Joe Dispenza says you should be inspired by a vision of the future instead of tormented by a memory of the past.
Beautiful.
And and that is so powerful. Like whenever I say that, I get goosebumps. And for me, it's powerful stuff. It really, really is. Yeah. His books and his meditations are, I don't know what I do without them. They are absolutely brilliant. We've spoke quite a bit about identity here.
Yeah.
What do you think has to shift in a man's identity before the behavior actually changes for good?
Hmm.
Mark, I know it's a big one.
Yeah, I think it's a big one, but I think it's probably the inverse of what I mentioned before is I'm good enough. I think like I'm a man that is becoming. I think those are the kind of identity shifts that I work with men. And maybe just what you've described, you know, rather than the mistakes have been defined by the mistakes that I've made or, you know, who I wasn't. Um, just I guess a growth mindset, you know.
Yeah. Rather
Yeah.
than that fixed mindset and that,
I love the Jocko Willing idea that, you know, I think it's a stoic idea, isn't it? That, you know, there are no problems, just things we need put attention on, you know, good, you know, whatever comes our way, good. And I think that identity shift of like, this is happening for me, not to me. Those are the kind of identity characteristics that I try and inspire in men, because that's how the thing that they come to me broken with, I've messed up my marriage, I'm going to lose everything, can suddenly become the greatest opportunity of your life. So I think, yeah, from an identity perspective, I guess they're more beliefs, but I guess our beliefs make up our identity. It's a kind of collection of those, isn't it? Um,
With the three children watching as well, Mark,
yeah,
what did that add to it? And did that change your resolve, or was it almost too much to carry?
yeah. I mean, absolutely, both for Jen and me. Let's be honest. Would we have stuck it out? Would we have, would Jen have stayed with me if we didn't have kids? Of course not. Like what I did to us was so awful. Would I have navigated through Jen rejecting me and, and losing faith in me? It was enough for me to say, I do not want my children to grow up from a broken family. And that's no judgment on, many successful, parents, but for me, my biggest value was I just knew it would be better that we worked through and heal as best we could, as long as it wasn't an unpleasant, toxic environment. As long as our interactions, and we were good like that. I mean, I'm sure we had our moments, but interestingly, you say that before. In September, when I launched the business, I'd been coaching kind of privately through communities that I was in, but there was no social media presence. I hadn't put this story out there yet. And so we sat our children down, and my eldest kind of thanked us for not having told her at the time, but said that she was very proud of us. And so yeah, they know the story now. They know, or the eldest girls do anyway. And so yeah, I think we're very proud that it was enough to, yeah, that we did it for the kids as well as, for what we felt was right. But yeah, I think I've lost your question slightly, but they were central to, our beliefs of what was the right thing for the kids
The family as a whole?
and the family as a whole. Yeah, and yeah, the research is pretty clear that an unhappy household is often as damaging as as a separated one for children. So I say all of this without judgment, and also with the caveat of staying together for the kids is obviously not always the right thing, but as a fuel for us to do the work, as a fuel for me to not give up, the children were pivotal for me. And that's what I see, and that's what I see in so many other dads. It's like, they're a father, and they're going to do whatever they can to keep their families together. And if they can't keep their families together, they will have a more amicable separation. They'll have a better relationship with the mother of their children. It is a win-win, really. To do the work is always a win.
That was going to be my next question, actually. What do you say to a man who thinks staying in a broken marriage is better than leaving and breaking everybody up?
Yeah. So, I guess, yeah. So I guess it definitely depends on the quality of the relationship, and there will be times where it is right for the children. We don't want children to be witnessing fights and unpleasant, and toxicity and tension and things like that. Maybe a different question is it okay to fight for the marriage for the kids?
Okay,
And
yeah.
and that I think definitely yes. And like I say, it isn't just for myself. There is good statistics, to say that it would be better if mum and dad were together. It's often, there's definitely, and I don't go heavy on this in my advertising and marketing, because I think, people do the best they can, and, children, of course, raised and do well in separated families. But is it a good enough reason to stay and to fight and to dig deep and to do the work? Absolutely. And, we make a commitment to each other on the altar often, maybe in the registry office. We make a commitment to each other in front of friends and family. We then have children together and put our names on the birth certificate. Let's be honest with ourselves. There is an intention when we do those things for the family to be together. So yeah, I just think it's, I mean, for me, it's the greatest calling for men to do the work. And especially because most men know deep down they haven't been their best self. You know, even the guys that haven't done the cheating, my story is probably the more extreme end of a lot of the men I meet. It's often been an absence. It's often been a kind of neglect, you know, a more of a kind of neglect of emotional needs or emotional unavailability. You know, there's all sorts of ways in which men haven't shown up. They've got too caught up in providing and not enough in the relationship. But for whatever the reason is, we know deep down that we haven't been our best self, and that means that we haven't shown up really as fathers as well. So I think, yeah. So I'm not quite sure if I've answered the question, but I think really on balance, as long as the toxic behaviors, as long as we're working as hard as we can to reduce the impact, I think trying to stay and trying to work on ourselves to give the marriage the best possible chance has to be the most important thing.
And you are proof that you can change and that when you do the work, when both of you do the work,
Yeah.
then you can come out the other side. So, for anyone listening, Mark, that
Yeah.
says you can't change, this is just the way that I am,
Yeah.
with that fixed victim mindset, what
Yeah.
would you what would you say to them having done all the work that you've done and come out the other side?
Yeah. Uh, I think I said it at the beginning that I know I took from childhood, but there is always something we can do today to make tomorrow slightly better. You know, I take the Jordan Peterson idea of, you know, clean up your own room. I think he meant it politically, clean up your own room first. I mean it literally, practically, do something about what you got around you first and think the things will kind of get better. So there is always something you can do. I guess that's the first thing I'd say. I think the bit probably that I would prefer to focus on is the mainstream view is that when a woman is done, she's done. And that is not true. I know, and I don't mean that disrespectfully for women listening out that, you know, that have listened to the relationship. My experience of talking to women on the other side, not just Jen, but women that have been through, is women want a man to fight for them, but she can't make it easy for them, you know, obviously, because otherwise she'll never trust the changes. And I don't even think this stuff's conscious. You know, Jen was done. I mean, she, as you've heard in my story, you know, she'd had all these promises made and broken repeatedly. So I think, but it does require accepting that the old marriage is dead. And that's why I call it marriage 3.0. Hopefully the men that come to me, we talk about maybe making marriage 2.0, and they haven't been around the cycle like I had been a few times. But yeah, it's a belief, it's an radical acceptance that the old marriage is dead, but with an openness in your heart to perhaps we could rebuild something new. Perhaps I could grow into a man that my wife could fall in love with. So that's probably the story of hope that I try to give. No guarantees. It might not be right for her, might not be right for you long term. But if that's where your heart is, do the work. Yeah.
How does a man start to rebuild trust when he's got years of letting people down behind him? How did you do it, Mark?
Yeah. Loving the truth and yeah, so a lot of the work I'd had to do was around kind of nice guy tendencies. People will have come across Dr. Glover's work, No More Mr. Nice Guy, and the tendency that we have to want to please and to
You mean
hide
you mean people pleasing, yeah?
people pleasing behaviors. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And so I think that was the biggest thing for me to restore trust with Jen, was to actually have a backbone and to, you know, to say what I mean and mean what I say and do what I say. And, you know, but ultimately it comes down to consistency
Mm. Being
and
responsible.
being responsible and taking ownership for, you know, those really important. And ultimately letting our ego go.
Yeah.
Because
So, so important. It
I
always comes
see it,
back to the ego with men.
It really does. And you see the comments of my videos and, on TikTok, and I love them actually, because they kind of prove,
Yeah, yeah,
the point really, the bitterness, the anger, you
yeah.
know, um, so yeah, put the ego aside, accept that you may definitely been at least 50% of it. And I bet my bottom dollar more. So just own your stuff and, seek to understand rather than be understood, I think over time. But yeah, I mean, there's some technicals in there. I think learning about validation of emotion is a big one. I think that damages an awful lot of trust between men and women, that men prefer to be right in an argument than they would to listen to their wife's experience, and to really validate feelings. So I think that's where a lot of trust gets damaged. And that's what I mean, the two parts to my story. There's the obvious stuff I did to betray her, and then there was the subtle stuff I did in conversation to invalidate Jen's experience and things like that. So I think really it comes down to those micro moments that I had to learn, and to, probably most importantly, to not give up. Every time Jen needed to give me feedback, or still gives me feedback today, rather than becoming a victim and being crushed by it, it's like, "Oh, what am I still not getting right?" And that's really what I teach guys. Just don't give up.
What would you say to any men that are terrified that it's already too late?
If one man can save the marriage somewhere,
That's a good point.
that's, it's like anything in life, isn't it? If one person can overcome this, if one man can make the changes, then it is possible. And also, I know I'm repeating myself, but it's also a win-win to do the work. Worst case scenario, you're better for the next partner. It's not one I talk loads about, because people don't want to hear that when they're meeting me for the first time, but that is the truth. At least you're going to understand how you got into the mess you got into. Yeah. I think it's like anything in life. We talked about the law of manifestation earlier. If you want something enough, you have to believe it's possible. So don't wait until you see you've got the reassurance from your wife that she's going to let you back in before you do the work. And that's the loop some men get into. It's like, well, will it work? Is it too far gone? Well, it is if you keep if you're waiting for her to tell you there's a chance. And I say all of this again with I know it's controversial, some of what I talk about, but I say all of this comes with great respect. And I go back to the thing I said, a man has to have all of this mentality, all of this kind of belief and hope, whilst also respecting that your wife said, get out. She's also, it's like, and it's holding both positions at the same time. I respect how she feels right now, but I'm going to do the work on myself anyway, for myself.
You reap what you sow, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So important. Put the work in, and eventually you'll get the results.
Absolutely.
So if you could go back then, Mark,
Yeah.
and give any advice to your younger self before all of this happened, what would you tell him?
Yeah. It's a good question. I knew you were going to ask me something like this. So I asked, and I jokingly said over the dinner table tonight, and my daughter said, get a better haircut. I think my wife said, I'm the wrong person to ask. So what is my answer to that? I think it's to love the truth. And I think I kind of said it earlier. I do think kind of love the truth more than the need to be liked. I cause so much damage because of my fear of kind of wanting to be liked. And so kind of, grow a backbone. Like I say, I've always had a belief that things can get better if you do the work. So that's probably not something I would need to say to my younger self. But yeah, I think if I'd worked on that sooner, and yeah, like do the work on fear. I think when I look back, my dad as a role model, I could see now looking back that my dad was quite afraid of the world.
Okay. How do you mean?
Well, I think, he was confident in many ways. He stood up in front of hundreds of people every Sunday morning and stuff. But kind of socially and in the world, there was always a kind of, I could sense a kind of fear of the world in him. And I think that's the work I wish I had done sooner. It's funny. I was listening to your story the other day, and you talk about boxing. Like one of my parts of my journey was getting over the fear of being hit. I didn't box for very long, but I went into a gym for a few months and learned some basic stuff, and that was life changing for me. So yeah, that's what I would say to my younger self. Like, go and face fear earlier. Just go and do it. Go and face the things I was afraid of, because having done that, done the work, I'm now happier than I've ever been before. And so,
And finally, Mark, what does the next chapter look like for you? And where can people find you and your work?
yeah. So the next chapter looks like for me. I mean, I'm just pinching myself. This has all happened. I only left the NHS 3 months ago. I'm
Oh,
now
wow.
kind of full-time coaching. Yeah. And yeah, just seeing great results in the guys that I coach. So I'm feeling very blessed. And yeah, the next step for me really is I want to continue to grow my model. I want to continue to help men improve their marriages. Long term, I have a kind of vision for, bringing on a kind of mentorship program, and the guys that are currently going through my program, helping other men. So yeah, so that's kind of what that bit looks like. If men are going through something like this, or know somebody who is going through a marriage crisis, I would love them to reach out. So you can find me on TikTok. Is my main platform, but Mark Cox Coaching, or my website is www.markcoxcoaching.com.
Put all your stuff in the show notes anyway, Mark.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on today. It's really been a brilliant conversation.
Thank you.
Obviously, I do remember you from the coaching master days when we did
Yeah,
our accreditations and our NLP and stuff. But it takes such courage to come out in public and share a story just like yours.
thank you.
And to sit here and be so honest, and what you did, and what it cost you. And I just know it's going to help so many men listening today who are in the thick of it right now. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it, Mark.
Thanks so much for having me on, Luke. Appreciate it.
No worries, Mark. Keep doing what you're doing, mate.
Thank you.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.